All right, so let's just dive right in. Today, today we're going to be tackling Operation Protective Edge,
Okay.
a conflict that has been in the headlines and sparking debate all over the world.
Right.
We've got a stack of sources here. Mainly what we've got is historical accounts.
Okay.
Think of it as like a collaborative online encyclopedia.
Gotcha.
And we're going to try to extract the key events,
Okay.
the figures involved, and really just try to make sense of the lasting impact.
Yeah, what's so captivating about this conflict is that it's not just like one simple isolated event.
Oh, right.
It's like a chain reaction.
Oh,
A
wow.
multi-front war with like ripple effects that just extend so far beyond the immediate region.
Okay, so let's go back to the beginning then.
Sure.
The fuse was lit on October 7th with a surprise attack on Israel,
Mm-hmm.
a day that has been compared to some of the darkest moments in history.
It's true.
Thousands of Hamas militants in a coordinated assault targeted civilians
Right.
in a way that truly shocked the world.
The brutality and the scale of this attack, I
Yeah.
mean, they were unprecedented.
Right.
Hamas has a history of targeting civilians, but
Yeah.
this went way beyond that.
Oh,
Their
right.
goal seems to have been to inflict maximum casualties
Right.
and instill widespread terror.
Oh, wow.
Just a tactic aimed at undermining Israel's sense of security.
Yeah.
And their very foundation.
The sources describe just scenes of absolute chaos,
Yeah.
with civilians trapped, fighting for their lives, over 250 people kidnapped, including soldiers, women, children, the elderly, even Holocaust survivors.
Yeah, it's just awful.
I mean, just imagine the terror, the desperation.
It's a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict
Right.
and just the vulnerability of civilian populations.
Yeah.
But, this event has also raised serious questions about intelligence failures.
Right.
Like, how could such a large-scale attack have caught Israel off guard?
Yeah,
That debate is still ongoing.
of course.
But it's clear that this was a wake-up call,
Right.
a chilling reminder of the threats that Israel faces.
Israel's response was immediate and overwhelming.
Yeah.
They declared war and mobilized a staggering 360,000 reservists,
Wow.
the largest mobilization in their history.
Wow.
They even requisitioned civilian vehicles. I mean, talk about a nation mobilizing all its resources.
It really does speak volumes about how seriously Israel perceived this threat.
Yeah.
This wasn't just a border skirmish.
No.
It was seen as an existential crisis.
Right.
A fight for survival,
Wow.
And this mobilization, while demonstrating their commitment to defense,
Right.
also underscores the gravity of this situation.
Fear and uncertainty just gripped the nation.
Yeah.
29 settlements in southern Israel were evacuated, and there were recommendations to evacuate 22 more in the north
Okay.
due to fears of Hezbollah joining the fight.
Right.
80,000 people were displaced from the Lebanon border region alone,
That's a lot of people.
leaving their homes, their lives behind.
This mass displacement really underscores the psychological impact of this war. It's not just about the immediate threat of violence.
Right.
It's the pervasive fear, the disruption of everyday life,
Of course.
the uncertainty of what the future holds.
Right.
These themes, the human experience of conflict, these keep surfacing as we delve deeper.
And you're right, this wasn't confined to one battlefield.
Yeah.
It quickly escalated into a multi-front war with Hezbollah and other groups launching attacks along the Lebanon and Syria borders,
Yeah.
stretching Israel's resources thin.
We see a fascinating contrast in their tactics.
Okay.
Hamas, relying on guerrilla warfare, launched attacks from civilian areas using tunnels and human shields.
Right.
Hezbollah, on the other hand, was more organized,
Okay.
employing advanced weapon systems
Right.
and engaging in what's known as attrition warfare.
Hold on. Attrition warfare.
Yeah.
What exactly does that mean?
It's a military strategy aimed at gradually wearing down the enemy
Okay.
through continuous pressure. In this case, through daily exchanges involving drones, artillery, anti-tank missiles,
Right.
and targeted strikes even on abandoned Israeli settlements.
Wow.
It's a war of endurance, aiming to deplete the enemy's resources and morale over time.
So it's not about winning decisive battles, but about slowly chipping away at the enemy's strength.
Exactly.
And you're right, the use of drones, Hezbollah's advanced weaponry, the cyber attacks that were also part of this conflict, it does feel like a preview of future warfare.
Absolutely.
It's a glimpse into how technology is reshaping the battlefield.
Yeah.
It's a stark departure from previous conflicts, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
And speaking of how this war was fought, the information front was just as intense.
Oh, yeah.
Over 4,000 international journalists were on the ground in Israel,
Wow.
making this the most heavily covered event in the country's history.
That's a lot.
Imagine the media frenzy.
That's unprecedented.
Yeah.
This level of media attention brought the conflict into living rooms worldwide instantaneously, shaping global perceptions and influencing international responses in real time.
But it wasn't just traditional media.
Right.
Social media became a primary source of information and misinformation.
That's right.
We saw both sides using these platforms for propaganda and psychological warfare, trying to control the narrative and win hearts and minds.
This is crucial to understand.
Yeah.
We're in a new era of warfare where the information battlefield is as critical as the physical one.
Wow.
The lines between truth and falsehood blur.
Yeah.
And the fight for public opinion takes place online.
Right.
Sometimes even more fiercely than on the ground.
It makes you wonder who's really winning this war of information.
Yeah, it really does.
The source mentions fact-checking and content moderation efforts.
Right.
But it's clear that both sides had their own narratives, their supporters, their detractors.
Of course.
It's a messy, complex landscape.
Absolutely. And this complexity is reflected in the international response.
Yeah.
Which was, let's just say, multifaceted. The UN, for example, condemned Hamas's actions, as you'd expect.
Right.
But also criticized Israel's response.
Right.
Which ruffled some feathers.
And then there's South Africa filing a genocide complaint with the International Court of Justice.
Right, the ICJ.
That was a highly controversial move.
Definitely.
Adding another layer of complexity and further polarizing public opinion.
The initial global response leaned in favor of Israel.
Yeah.
Likely due to the shock of the surprise attack.
Yeah.
And the sheer brutality of Hamas's tactics.
Right.
However, as the war dragged on and the casualty count rose, that support began to waver.
Yeah.
We saw protests erupting worldwide, both for and against Israel, reflecting the moral ambiguities of this conflict.
It's like a tug of war for global sympathy.
Exactly.
Highlighting the fact that there are no easy answers.
Right.
No clear-cut good guys and bad guys.
Yeah.
This isn't a simple story.
Precisely. And that's a key takeaway here.
Yeah.
It's tempting to get swept up in the emotions of war. To demonize one side and glorify the other.
Right.
But conflicts like this demand a nuanced understanding.
Yeah.
A recognition that there are multiple perspectives,
right,
multiple narratives, and a lot of gray areas.
And speaking of those shifting tides of the war, let's look at how the conflict escalated.
Yeah.
And some of the key battles that unfolded.
Sure.
Remember Hezbollah?
Oh, yeah.
Well, their attacks started reaching deeper into Israel.
Okay.
Targeting major population centers like Haifa Sharon and Gush Dan.
This was a significant escalation, showing Hezbollah's growing capabilities and willingness to strike at the heart of Israel.
Yeah.
It also put immense pressure on Israel to respond forcefully.
And they did in September.
Okay.
Launching Operation Northern Arrows and Operation New Order, targeting Hezbollah's headquarters in Beirut.
Right.
This was a bold move, a direct strike at the enemy's command structure.
And it was successful.
Wow.
Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, was eliminated, sending shockwaves throughout the region.
Wow.
This was a major turning point in the war.
This begs the question. How did the elimination of Nasrallah impact the course of the war?
Yeah.
Did it weaken Hezbollah's position?
It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
But Nasrallah was a charismatic and influential leader.
Right.
His death undoubtedly created a leadership vacuum within Hezbollah.
Yeah.
And forced them to reassess their strategy.
Right.
Some analysts argue that it made them more cautious.
Okay.
While others believe it fueled their desire for revenge.
And Israel didn't stop there.
Nope.
They launched a ground incursion into southern Lebanon, aiming to dismantle Hezbollah's infrastructure and push them back from the border.
Yeah.
This was a major escalation.
Yeah.
A move that many saw as a gamble.
It was a calculated risk, but one that Israel deemed necessary to secure their northern border.
Yeah.
It also highlights the interconnected nature of this war.
Right.
What started as a conflict with Hamas in Gaza had now expanded to include Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Right.
Demonstrating the potential for the entire region to become destabilized.
And that's where we're going to pause for now.
Okay.
But you're right, it's about to get even more complicated.
Yeah, we've only scratched the surface of this conflict.
So much more to unpack. We'll pick up right where we left off in part 2 of this deep dive into Operation Protective Edge.
Sounds good.
Last time we left off with Israel's ground operation in Lebanon. Talk about a dramatic turn of events.
Yeah, it really shows how tangled this whole conflict became.
It's a perfect example of how one event can trigger a cascade of others.
Right.
Remember, it all started with Hamas,
Mm-hmm.
but quickly expanded to include Hezbollah.
Exactly.
And now, as you hinted, we need to talk about Iran's role in all of this.
Yeah.
The sources paint a picture of Iran as a major player behind the scenes,
Right.
the puppet master, if you will.
Yeah.
They were allegedly supporting and coordinating multiple groups who were attacking Israel. We're talking Hamas, Hezbollah, even the Houthis in Yemen and some Iraqi militias.
That's right.
It's a real web of alliances and influence.
It really is. Your sources are describing Iran as the central orchestrator,
Right.
funneling weapons,
Yeah.
funding strategic guidance to these various groups.
Wow.
It speaks to Iran's long-standing ambition to exert its influence in the region
Right.
and challenge what they see as Western dominance,
Right.
particularly Israel's
What's
position.
on the Houthis? Those are the rebels in Yemen, right?
That's right.
I mean, they actually declared war on Israel.
They did.
What were they hoping to achieve so far away from the main conflict?
It's a great question. And it really highlights how this conflict had ripple effects far beyond its immediate borders.
Right.
While the Houthi declaration of war might have been largely symbolic, a gesture of solidarity with Hamas and a way to grab headlines.
Right.
They weren't just sitting on the sidelines.
Right.
They actually disrupted global trade by attacking ships in the Bab al-Mandab Strait, a key shipping route that connects the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden.
Wow.
Imagine the impact that had on global commerce.
Wow. I hadn't realized they had that kind of reach.
Yeah.
So they weren't just paying lip service, they were actively trying to disrupt things.
Right.
And one of their attacks, a missile and drone strike, actually resulted in a fatality in Tel Aviv.
Mm-hmm.
That's a long way from Yemen.
It is.
How did Israel respond to that?
Israel, as you might expect, didn't take that lying down.
Right.
They retaliated with airstrikes on Houthi military targets in Yemen,
Okay.
demonstrating both their reach and their willingness to strike back against anyone who threatens them,
Yeah.
no matter how far away.
Right.
It was a clear message. Don't mess with Israel, even from a distance.
It's a message to Iran as well, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely.
We see you pulling the string.
Exactly. And the sources make it clear that Israel wasn't afraid to target Iran directly.
Okay.
They hit Iranian facilities in Syria
Right.
and even assassinated key figures in the Quds Force,
Okay.
the elite unit of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard responsible for overseas operations.
Wow. This is some serious cloak and dagger stuff.
It is.
Like something out of a spy thriller.
Yeah.
We're talking about covert operations, assassinations, a shadow war playing out alongside the main conflict.
It's a fascinating, albeit unsettling,
Yeah.
look into the world of intelligence and counterterrorism.
Right.
And this conflict marked a turning point
Okay.
in the ongoing struggle between Iran and Israel.
Right.
It escalated from proxy conflicts where they were fighting through intermediaries
Yeah.
to direct confrontations.
Because in April 2024, Iran launched a direct attack on Israel for the first time.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Wait, what?
Over 100 ballistic missiles and dozens of cruise missiles. What happened?
Right.
Were they successful?
It was a massive attack.
Yeah.
A serious escalation of hostilities.
Right.
But it seems that international military cooperation, specifically a coalition that included the U.S.,
Okay.
UK, France, and Jordan, played a key role in neutralizing the attack, preventing even greater damage.
Yeah.
It was a powerful demonstration of global forces working together to contain the conflict.
That's incredible. It sounds like the whole world was holding its breath, watching to see how this would play out.
I think so.
Everyone knew this could easily spiral out of control.
The stakes were incredibly high, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And even though the attack was largely thwarted,
Right.
it sent shockwaves through the international community.
Right.
This was a direct assault on Israel by a state actor,
Right.
a major escalation that fueled fears of a wider regional war,
Right.
one that could draw in global powers.
So how did Israel respond? I imagine they weren't just going to sit there and take it.
Of course not. They retaliated with strikes on Iranian Revolutionary Guard facilities.
Okay.
But interestingly,
Yeah.
they also showed some restraint,
Okay.
likely at the urging of the U.S.,
Right.
who were desperate to prevent the situation from spiraling out of control.
Right.
It was a delicate balancing act, trying to deter further aggression without triggering an all-out war.
It sounds like walking a tightrope.
It really was.
But the tension didn't just disappear, did it?
Not at all in October.
Right.
Iran attacked again,
Okay.
this time in response to the killing of senior Hezbollah and Revolutionary Guard figures in Syria.
Mm-hmm.
Israel once again retaliated with strikes within Iran.
Right.
The entire situation remained extremely volatile.
Right.
A tinderbox waiting to explode.
So we have this escalating conflict between Iran and Israel.
Right.
Multiple fronts opening up devastating attacks. It's hard to even imagine what the human cost of all of this must have been.
The source provides figures for casualties on both sides.
Right.
But it notes that the Palestinian casualty figures in particular might be unreliable.
Okay.
It's a grim reminder of the devastating toll that war takes on human life.
Yeah.
The sheer scale of the suffering is difficult to comprehend.
Thousands of lives lost, countless others shattered.
It's true.
It's heartbreaking. What about the global response to all of this? Did the world unite in condemnation, or was it more divided?
As you might expect, given the complexity of the situation,
Yeah.
the global response was mixed.
Right.
The UN condemned Hamas's actions, of course,
Of course.
but also criticized Israel's response,
Right.
which drew criticism from some quarters.
Yeah.
And we've already mentioned South Africa's controversial decision to file a genocide complaint with the International Court of Justice.
Right.
Yeah.
The source also mentions protests happening all over the world.
Yeah?
Some in support of Israel, others against.
Right.
It seems like this conflict really tapped into some deeply held beliefs and emotions on a global scale.
Absolutely. It's important to remember that this wasn't just a war between two nations.
Right.
It was a conflict that touched on deep-seated historical grievances,
Right.
religious tensions, and geopolitical rivalries.
Right.
It exposed existing divisions within societies
Yeah.
and amplified them on a global stage.
Wow.
It's a reminder that these conflicts are never isolated.
Mm-hmm.
They reverberate outwards,
Yeah.
impacting people and communities far beyond the immediate battlefields.
It's a lot to process all of this. We've covered so much ground, but it feels like we're just scratching the surface of this conflict.
Yeah.
What else can we glean from these sources?
Right.
Where do we go from here?
Well, there's still the unresolved issue of the hostages.
Right.
Hundreds of Israelis taken captive by Hamas during that initial attack.
Right.
That's a story that's still unfolding.
Yeah.
One filled with emotion, political maneuvering, and the enduring hope for their safe return.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in the bigger picture, the military strategies and the political maneuvering.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that at the heart of it all are human lives.
Absolutely.
Families left waiting and wondering.
Yeah.
Lives put on hold.
And beyond that,
Yeah.
there's the question of what the future holds.
Right.
Will this conflict lead to further escalation?
Mm.
Or could it somehow, against all odds,
Right.
be a catalyst for meaningful dialogue and lasting peace?
The sources don't offer any easy answers, do they?
Not at all, and perhaps that's one of the key takeaways here.
Yeah.
Conflicts like Operation Protective Edge are incredibly complex.
Right.
They resist simple explanations or solutions.
Right.
And their consequences can be far-reaching and unpredictable.
No neat and tidy ending, no clear-cut victor.
Right.
It's a reminder that war is rarely black and white.
That's true.
And the repercussions are often felt for generations.
Exactly. And as we delve deeper into the aftermath of this conflict, we'll see just how profound and lasting those repercussions can be.
Sounds like we have a lot more to uncover. We'll continue this deep dive into Operation Protective Edge in Part 3. Stay with us. Welcome back. We've been unpacking Operation Protective Edge.
Yes.
A conflict that's really exposed the intricate
Right.
and often brutal realities of modern warfare.
Yeah.
Now, as we wrap up our deep dive,
Mm-hmm.
it feels important to shift our focus to the aftermath,
Yeah.
the human cost, and the long-lasting consequences that ripple outwards from the battlefield.
You're absolutely right. We've talked about the geopolitical chess game,
Yeah.
the military strategies, the influence of media,
Right.
but ultimately it all boils down to the human impact.
Right.
And the sources we've been exploring
Mm-hmm.
don't shy away from the stark realities
Yeah.
of the casualties, both military and civilian, Israeli and Palestinian.
The numbers are staggering.
They are.
And what's even more disturbing is that there's a lot of debate about the accuracy of those numbers,
Yeah.
particularly when it comes to Palestinian casualties.
Right.
The IDF claims that over 19,000 Palestinian militants were killed across all fronts.
Wow.
But Hamas disputes those figures, arguing that many civilian casualties were misclassified as militants.
That discrepancy really highlights the challenges of getting accurate information during wartime,
Yeah.
especially in a conflict as emotionally charged and politically complex as this one.
Right.
It also raises serious questions about accountability and the need for independent investigations to determine the true extent of the human cost.
It's a reminder that behind every statistic,
Yes.
every headline, there's a human story. A life lost, a family shattered.
Absolutely.
It's hard to even grasp the magnitude of the grief and trauma left behind.
Absolutely. And while the sources don't go into detail about the individual stories of loss,
Right.
the sheer scale of it is undeniable.
Yeah.
Thousands of lives lost, countless others irrevocably changed.
It's heartbreaking.
We're talking about families torn apart, communities shattered, a generation marked by the scars of war.
It makes you think about what happens to a society after experiencing such profound loss.
Yeah.
How do they rebuild both physically and emotionally?
Yeah.
Where do they even begin?
And that's where these sources provide some really interesting insights.
Okay.
They point out that within Israel,
Mm-hmm.
the war triggered a period of intense introspection,
Yeah.
particularly when it comes to military preparedness.
Okay.
The surprise attack on October 7th
Right.
exposed vulnerabilities in their defenses,
Right. Yeah.
prompting a reassessment of their security strategies,
Right.
intelligence gathering, and overall readiness.
Right. And there were those mass evacuations we talked about earlier.
Yeah,
Thousands of Israelis forced from their homes in the south and north.
exactly.
What happened to them in the aftermath?
Many of them ended up in hotels or temporary accommodations.
Right.
Their lives completely upended, their sense of security shattered.
Wow.
The sources indicate that a significant number of those evacuees hadn't returned to their homes,
Right.
even months after the conflict ended.
Wow.
They became, in essence, internal refugees within their own country.
That's a powerful image, a reminder that the impact of war extends far beyond the immediate battlefields.
Yeah.
It disrupts lives, uproots communities,
Right.
and creates ripple effects that can take years, even generations, to subside.
And it's not just about physical displacement.
Right.
There's also a deep psychological impact.
Of course.
The trauma of experiencing such violence,
Right.
the loss of loved ones, the constant fear of attack.
Yeah.
These are wounds that take time and support to heal.
The sources also point out that the war intensified existing social divisions within Israel, particularly around the issue of mandatory military service.
That's right.
There was renewed debate about the role of different communities,
Yeah.
specifically the ultra-Orthodox community,
Right.
and their exemption from military service.
That's right. This was a long-standing point of contention in Israeli society.
Yeah.
And the war brought it to the forefront. The
Mhm.
sense of shared sacrifice, the question of who bears the burden of defending the nation.
Right.
These became very sensitive and divisive topics.
Wow.
There were calls for greater equality and a more equitable sharing of responsibility when it comes to national defense.
So the war, in a way, forced Israel to confront some difficult questions about its own internal dynamics.
Yeah.
About identity, equality, and national unity.
Precisely. And these internal struggles played out against a backdrop of heightened tensions
Yeah.
with Arab Israelis.
Right.
The sources note an increase in distrust and accusations of collaboration with Hamas.
Yeah.
This led to legal actions against some individuals
Right.
and even restrictions on humanitarian efforts
Right.
coming from Arab communities.
Wow.
It was a period of deep suspicion and polarization,
Yeah.
a climate that made coexistence even more challenging.
It's as if the war, in some ways, exacerbated existing prejudices and divisions.
Yes.
Making the path to peace even more treacherous.
That's a perceptive observation. And while these sources don't offer any definitive answers about the future,
Right.
they do suggest that Operation Protective Edge was a pivotal moment,
Yeah.
a turning point that will shape the region for years to come.
Right.
It's left behind a complex legacy
Yeah.
of lost trauma and unresolved issues.
So as we wrap up our deep dive,
Yes.
it feels like we're left with more questions than answers.
That's true.
What do you think is the most important takeaway for our listener, given everything we've explored?
I think it's crucial to recognize that conflicts like this are rarely black and white, rarely about simple narratives of good versus evil.
Right.
They're messy, complex,
Yeah.
and deeply intertwined with history, ideology, and human emotion.
Yeah.
And while we've focused on the facts, the events, the players involved,
Right.
we can't lose sight of the human stories at the heart of it all.
Right.
Behind every statistic,
Yeah.
every headline, there's a life impacted, a future altered.
It's true.
That's the enduring legacy of Operation Protective Edge.
Yeah.
A reminder of the profound human cost of war and the urgent need for peace.
Well said. And with that, we'll conclude our deep dive into Operation Protective Edge.
Okay.
We've covered a lot of ground, but we've only scratched the surface of this complex and multifaceted conflict.
It's very complex.
As always, we encourage you to keep exploring, to seek out diverse perspectives.
Absolutely.
And to engage in thoughtful dialogue, because understanding these conflicts, grappling with their complexities, is the first step towards building a more peaceful world.
I agree.